Kia ora team, Noel Willoff here. Thanks so much for tuning into today's episode, but there's one important thing I want to say before you watch this video. I've noticed that over 91% of you who watch our content on YouTube do not subscribe to the podcast. My promise to you is if you subscribe to the podcast, I'll continue to get more of the guests on that you love and make sure that this conversation and this podcast grows to new levels. So please hit that subscribe button. Secondly, if you want to support the podcast and help us grow, make sure you check out our official sponsor of the podcast, Moana Road. We've partnered to give you a discount on their products. Head to the checkout and put in the discount code BTS20 and you'll save 20% off all of their products. Save some cash, help the podcast. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. DK, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Noah.
Thanks for jumping on. I wanted to start the podcast by really unpacking a little bit about who you are and what you do. You've been working across TEDx Wellington for over a decade. You've done a TED Talk which has surpassed over 1 million views. You're a speaker coach. You've done podcasting since 2006, one of the OGs. But if you had to strip away, I guess, all of the titles and the labels, how would you actually describe the work that you do and why you do it?
I'll probably summarize it by my purpose line, which is to enable people to find and have voice. And then out of that, it's pretty obvious being a speaker coach where that aligns too. So I'm a speaker coach. I help leaders deliver impressive presentations. So that's half of what I kind of do in grown-up life. And then the other half, I position myself as a creative producer, where I craft delicious learning experiences. And that could be anything from, like you said, TEDx, which are large-scale events, up to 1,000 people in a room with 5,000 people watching online, right down to small kind of, we got a staff of 30, we want to take them away and do some strategic work. We want to make it deeply creative and engaging. Could you come and help us with that? So that's the whole span. I do in-studio stuff as well through my past podcasts and things. And I also hire out studios for people who want to do peculiar and wonderful things as well. So that's the creative producing side. But yeah, the storytelling and speaker coaching as well is summarized by that, enabling people to find and have voice.
And what draws you towards that?
Right, let's get therapeutic. Right, this is therapy, man. My childhood. It's as simple as that. So when I grew up, I was born with a hearing impairment, and that was spotted early on. And for some people who have hearing impairments, like my good self, that comes along with some issues around speech development. So kind of obvious when you think about it. If you can't hear as a kid, you can't then say certain things, especially if you can't hear them. So I can speak properly in inverted commas. So I had a lot of speech therapy as a kid from my formative years, from like 3 till about 11. Kind of like that every week, like going to a speech therapist, and it was basically the idea of learning to listen correctly, understanding even things that are deficit for me. Like I know there's a K in that because I'm talking about milk, but the K is a hard K and I can't quite pick that up. But then if I can't hear it, I then don't think about saying it that way. So milk apparently for me was milsh when I was growing up.
Milsh.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I couldn't hear the hard K.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've had to learn then to pronounce K because I didn't have that. So then growing up, I was quite quiet because I couldn't speak properly, or I felt I couldn't because I couldn't hear properly, and I literally couldn't. And I'm still hearing impaired, classed as hearing impaired, 50% in one ear, 75% in the other. So I listen very well because I have to. So I lean in a lot and I listen with the whole face and things. But because of that, I probably then have a tendency to be considerate of voice and considerate of other people who don't or don't feel like they have voice. Hence why I position myself in that space now.
So what you're saying there is through your hearing impairment, especially as a kid, that's almost sort of shapes your obsession with storytelling today and communication.
Totally. And what I'm finding now is I'm more interested in people who don't just tell a story in a normal way, you know, and there are certainly mediums out there that are obvious, filmmaking and podcasting, interviewing, literally written word is the obvious one as well, but filmic stuff, more abstract things, really interested in that. But helping people who are standing on stages tell their voice, because as you know, when someone asks you to speak in public, Or even if you're in a scenario where you're going around the table, you know, when you first start working, you have to go around the table and say, tell us who you are.
Scared,
And
100%.
yeah, you feel the butterflies. You're like, what? There's nothing attacking me here. You know, why am I feeling fear? But we're conditioned that way, you know, and we can get into the background of all that. But helping people just to have that idea of, I can share my story. But most of the time in today's society, that means speaking. So speaking up. So if you have a problem with speaking up for whatever reason, mine was a literal problem with my voice and my ears. Other people have other issues around having voice, whether it be gender, culture, background, the idea of self-identity, stuff like that, or situational, hierarchical things, you know. Cutting through, enabling people to have voice is the most purest form of joy that I can have in this world.
Yeah, it's fundamentally so important and probably quite like underrated at the same time. Yeah. I think a lot of people think it's just like a natural ability, and some people do have an incredible natural, like God-given gift when it comes to storytelling and being a good communicator. But I think at the same time, there's like strategies, foundations that you can actually develop to be a better speaker. And it always cracks me up doing this podcast because I've never classified myself as like particularly the best speaker. And then I have people like yourself, who's a public speaking coach, one of the best in New Zealand, Jahan Casanado, who's like also an incredible orator, journalist. And a part of me sometimes feels like, man, big weight on my shoulders having these sort of guys on the podcast.
Yeah, that imposter syndrome kicks in. You're like, can I hang on cognitively?
Totally.
You know, can I keep up with their oratory skills or their articulation of things and stuff? But don't fear that for sure. First of all, but I got to ask you a question then. From that storytelling perspective, you mentioned that you know a whole bunch of good storytellers. Is this the case? You probably know a huge bunch of people in your network. When you sit down with them, can tell a great story, right? That's fine. Would they then transfer those skills onto a stage in front of 100 people they don't know?
I think it really depends on the individual.
Right.
Some people have that ability. Some others can be like so good in social situations. And then, having to do that in front of a whole bunch of strangers, completely different, like sort of muscle you've got to exercise. There
we go. And I know the inverse as well. I know a lot of great public speakers who aren't good storytellers. And that's where mainly I work with leaders who suddenly realize brevity is a skill because they just talk, you know, and they have that privilege of feeling really confident. It's like, no, that's fine. I'll go up and open this, whatever it is, because I'm a leader and I'm a CEO. So already I have the chops. But 20 minutes in, they're like, oh, yeah, I haven't really given a good story model here. I haven't really been considerate of the audience. So that's where I find really interesting is you can be a great storyteller, but not a great public speaker. But the opposite is true. Like I know good public speakers who aren't great storytellers as well. Yeah. And it's the Venn diagram, if you like, the overlap. That's where great public speaking or oratory comes from. Yeah. Knowing the two. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're two different skills. They overlap, but they are different. So.
And just circling back to your childhood, with your ability or inability to, I guess, hear and sort of maybe listen in the same way or just hear things that ordinary other kids could, how did that sort of define your childhood? Did that affect like your sense of belonging in any way? Like how was your childhood because of that? Did it ever define you?
Pretty much. I think it did, but I think that was more to do with me than anybody else defining it. You know, we're our own worst enemies and all that other stuff. But growing up, especially formative years, I had two older brothers. I was the baby of three. And we all get on, love my brothers, amazing men and humans growing up. But they did have a louder aura to them than me. So growing up, it was a very internal process, especially in my definitely teenage years. It was an internal journey for me versus an experiential journey of growing up. And it wasn't a particularly happy one, I should say, but I got through it. But yeah, understanding onto the back end of that is we've all done these little exercises, especially when we go to certain events, you know, kind of talk to your teenage self or kid self. And that's a really interesting exercise because it can bring up a lot of emotion, but can also bring a lot of understanding of like, oh shit, of course I was that way because I didn't have the literacy, didn't have the life experience. Then we get into the Gabo Mate stuff, right? The wisdom of trauma and shit like that, where we kind of start look through the lens of like, of course that wasn't, if I had that experience now as an adult, that wouldn't affect me.
Yeah.
But I was a kid, so of course it affected me.
Yeah.
So you're growing up with an impairment of any kind of any definition does have an impact on your life. And I wasn't really academic, I suppose, in any way. The only thing I could do was art, you know, in other words, draw, which is very solitary, confining, specific skill. Didn't have any input with that, so it was easy to do. Either that or hitting the drums. That was my thing that I wanted to be when I grew up, but I never made it. But there we go. So yeah, that was my upbringing.
And would you say that you had like a positive sort of upbringing, good childhood?
Overall, yeah, for sure. Like, grew up in the valleys of South Wales, so very, I would say, lower middle class, upper working, lower class, whatever. And in the valleys of South Wales is a very distinct cultural experience, I would say, and beautiful. Grew up on the side of a hill. Love looking across valleys. I like things going up and down. That's why I like Wellington.
Yeah,
when I first moved to Wellington, people were warning me about the hills, the rain, and the wind. Yeah, right? And I was like, that's the world, surely, because I grew up in a place that was very windy on a side of the thing, so hills, and it rained a lot. So Wales, right, it's very green because of that. So it's lovely to have that experience of not worrying about weather. Billy Connolly quote, right? It's never bad weather, it's just wrong clothes.
I like that. I never heard that.
Right? It's just, weather's just weather. It's never bad. You can have bad weather. It's just weather. So I learned that very early on. But I had a good childhood. I think I could have had a more positive one if I could hear better, for sure. If I could find my voice and find my way through it, and not as a turbulent kind of depressed little teenager. But that's the teenage angst. Most people have that. Yeah. You know? That's right. So yeah, nothing definitive in there.
That's really good. And I guess, how did you first get into this area of, you know, supporting people around their communication and public speaking? Was that always like a skill that you identified growing up, or did you sort of like fall into it?
Kind of fell into it. Like, my first job was in local government, where I had to speak at council meetings. I had to write papers and stuff and go and present them to boards and things. And I hated that. I hate standing and speaking and being the eyeballs all on you, right? The natural feelings that everybody should have, by the way. If there's a lot of people looking at you, that's your lizard brain kicking in, telling you you're either food or in trouble with the tribe, be scared, right? So forgive yourself if you're listening to this and you're scared of public speaking, because there's eyeballs on you. That's right. That's your brain doing the right job. Problem is now that we live in a society that there's no wolves about to attack you from the undergrowth. So stuff like that doesn't really matter, but we have to retrain our brain. So growing up, I never liked that. Then as I transitioned into some other spaces, so I started my first company in 2004, totally failed, had to move back in with the folks, fantastic. And then my second company, Media Snackers, in 2006, was all about the emerging web, or new media, as we used to call it. You youngsters don't know anything about this, but you know it as social media. You used to call it new media. And that was when I first started blogging, podcasting, doing all the cool stuff online. And then I started speaking. And weirdly enough, people started paying me to speak. I was like bemused by this experience of being like, not only flown around. We did 5 continents in 5 years with that company. I was doing over 6 figures, employing about 7 people, and having a riot, working with like BBC, Gates Foundation, Ubisoft, UNICEF, and things like that, helping people to get online and do this. You know, teaching people on MySpace, for God's sake.
MySpace,
yeah, MySpace, Vox, Xanga, LiveJournal, things that not around anymore. But teaching them how to have a global voice, because that was really odd back then, if you think about it, because you couldn't do that on your mobiles at that point. So that was the difference. It was all interfaced through the desktop, right? Then I started, like I said, people started to invite me to speak at their conferences, because this new media world was really starting to. So I started going around the world and getting paid for this. But my first probably 3 years, God, I sucked. God, I was really bad. And I hated every minute of it. Like I sweated profusely, felt sick. I had to go to the loo lots beforehand and afterwards. It wasn't a pleasant experience, but I was getting paid, remember? And I was also getting gigs off the back because not only would people pay me to see me speak or pay me to speak at their conference, usually off the back of it, then contact me saying, you do training, right? Could you come in and help our cohort here? And it was like, oh, this is into the funnel, traditional business funnel stuff. So I kept having to do it, even though I didn't like it. And then something clicked in me. And it was just like, you know what? Why am I fearing this stuff? Most people enjoy it, even though I hate it. And I tried to turn it into more conversational and more a showcase. So the second I started to show people rather than talk at people, like literally jumping online, open up my laptop and show it, turned it almost like a masterclass style, more conversational. I started getting my rhythm. In other words, finding my voice, for want of a better word or phrase. And that's the really interesting thing when I work with clients. It's like, what's your style? I can come at you and say, you should be doing this. You should be standing there. You should be. That's a style. That's a way. That's not the way. It might be not the way for you. So no, it took me a long time to understand that I needed to get good at this. And then secondly, I got anywhere good at it. And I'm still learning now. I still have a lot to learn, right? And then the transition from me doing it to then helping other people only came much later. We're talking like in 2000 and probably 11, 12. No, actually, I go back a little bit. When I was back in Cardiff, my mate had the license for TEDx Cardiff, one of the first licenses at the back around 2000, I want to say 7 or 8, something like that. And I helped out there. I spoke at it, but I was also helping out then for a couple of them in the background as a speaker liaison. So I started to help people just to craft their stories a little bit better, get a bit more confidence. But it was really light touch at that point. Fast forward to 2011, I moved to New Zealand. 2012, I was set myself up, established in Wellington, and I got my first TEDx license to run here in Wellington. And very quickly realized that the light touch was actually failing our speakers because we were pushing them on the little red carpet and it was being recorded and chucked up on the YouTube channel for life, right? And we had a duty of care and responsibility that we don't just throw people up just because they look good on paper. So from that and the intervening years then, so from 2013 onwards, we had like a proper 5-week coaching experience for all our speakers in the TEDx program.
It's like a fight camp.
Bit like that, although no one got in. Well, there was some pain, but in a different way. But that was beautiful because then it was a shared learning experience. You built a funnel around it, a shared experience of community, and they lent to each other. So every week they got up and gave their talk to get better at it. And every week we tried to steal their scripts because you shouldn't have scripts, as we know. So that was the big first transition of trying to help other people. And we failed a lot of people in that process, but I failed a lot of people and say a royal we year because I was running that program. Again, because I didn't understand that the style is more important than substance early on. When you're trying to help people to have voice, substance comes later. You know, some people start with substance, fair enough, but most of the time is like trying to figure out, well, where are you best? What's the best version of you? And how can I amplify that through what I know? You know, and it might not be standing and speaking. It might be a corollary of that. It might be sitting down. It might be pairing up. It might be showing rather than telling. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff that only in the last 12, 13 years did I understand how to transition where I've learned to others.
And for your clients today, what are some of those key like themes or challenges that people come to specifically around public speaking or communications? Like what are those things that they identify in themselves that they want to change?
So yeah, it depends if you forgive me for that. And I'll come back to the TEDx talk that you mentioned early on because that was the talk about the title of that talk was the public speaking lesson you never got.
Yes.
Right. So in that I talk about my little, I suppose, framework, where it's grace, credibility, and resonance. So coming to your question then, when I get a client, I'm thinking through those those 3 things. Sometimes if I'm lucky, they might have sent me a video or a link to something they've done. Brilliant. So I can look at that and going, great, just from a grace perspective, that's not what you're saying, how you're saying it. I'm looking at them, usually with the sound off. And I'm going, cool, how are they looking? Well, I'm what am I feeling from them? Do they look comfortable? Are they competent? Are they smiling? And do I get a sense of what they're speaking about just through their physicality? Great. That's the grace side. Then I come to the credibility, turn it back on and just listen. So that's the stories they're telling and the way in which they're telling them. The models, you know, they got a nice little arc to it. It's an A to Z, you know, story model, whatever. Are they doing future state, current state? Are they having fun doing chapterizing things? Okay, I'm just thinking about what they're saying. Do they have the credibility? And then are they coming from a lived experience as well? Or they just giving like what's called report style and presenting. It's like, this is the data from someone else. Think about it, right? And it's not wrong. I'm just trying to understand the credibility. And then the third one is like, I'm trying to pick up with the audience's reactions, the emotional resonance in the piece. Like, what are the audience feeling when they're listening and watching this person? Yeah. Because that's really important to understand about the tonality. And you can imagine some of my clients have high credibility because some of them are very esteemed, ex-All Blacks or a Dame or a very senior in the film industry or whatever. So credibility is not an issue if you look at their bio. But their grace is the issue. Yeah, they're not that comfortable because they're transitioning out of one sphere of influence or one sphere of excellence, into another. And why should you be excellent? That's the Dunning-Kruger effect idea that, you know, someone's good in that space should be good in the other space. We're getting that with Donald Trump at the moment, right? He was good at that. He was never good at that, but now he's not good at that, right? But the point is, some people come and they already have excellence. Yeah. But that doesn't translate easy sometimes to the, hey, it's great to be here. Thank you for that. I really want to uncover X, Y, and Z today, blah, 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 as an oratory practice, right? So sometimes it's a grace. Sometimes it's a credibility because the stories they choose are really odd and they don't have a neat fit. And especially from an emotional resonance, because I'm always advocating for the listener / watcher. I'm always the audience, trying to be really broad in my aesthetic about how I approach what I'm understanding. And therefore, it could be manifest, for example, if I'm working with someone and they got a script. So my whole views on scripts is that you shouldn't have a script if you know what you're saying.
And that's terrible, terrifying for people.
It is, and they lack. If you watch the video, I do some fun stuff about why you shouldn't have scripts, so we won't get into it here. But the idea of scripts are very constraining for you as the person who is speaking, because now you're reading, and reading is different than speaking. And not many people can write as well as they speak, or match the speaking tone to their writing tone. That's why we get script writers. Script writers is an actual discipline. It's really hard to be a script writer. Now, let's just say you're good at all that. Okay, I'll give you that. Then it's very different than reciting the body of text with the emotional resonance that you need. That's called acting. Having a script and being able to embody the emotional tone now from that page. And again, acting is really hard to do. So you got script writing, acting, there's two disciplines that comes from a script, and we're thinking, oh, you just write the script and you practice, and you deliver that, and you think that gives a great talk. For those reasons I just shared, no, right? So many a times with my clients, I'm trying to steal their scripts or trying to think of strategies to get the scripts out of their hands. And the fun one I had, which I sometimes share with, a person came, they had a script, and it was fantastic in terms of credibility, fantastic in terms of look. They had a lovely little presentation, highly visual, fantastic. But there was no emotional resonance in the piece. I weren't hearing them because they were head down reading, and I was talking, how do I get this person to give me their script because they're very esteemed? So I asked, can I borrow your script? Because I just want to double check on things. So we laid it out cool, and I just, could you do me a favor? Could you just run through this bit for me? Just up in now. I'm just going to, it's not a test of you saying what's written, but I just want to feel it for me. Just go up in and just do that bit. And it's always really important to get up and do it. Cool. I said, brilliant. Could you tell me this little bit now? Cool. And then after the third time, it's like, why do you need this script? Because you've lived every experience that I'm asking you to tell me. It's coming out a little bit different, but that's fine. All you got to remember is the point of the story, not the story itself, because you'll get the story. It will just fall out of you because you've lived it. Yeah. And then I asked them a really important question. I said, how does your partner describe you from a personality perspective? Because I weren't getting any personality, remember. It was just reading, right? And they said a couple of words, and within the second word I think they said was cheeky. I'm like, fascinating. Would you say that your partner knows you better than most? Yeah. I said, I'm not getting any of that from you. So what's stopping you here? One of the things that could be stopping you is a script, because all you're doing is reading. You're not allowing yourself to be and live in the stories again. So those are the type of devices that I use to try and elevate and excavate the personality from the story as well, and the person. So hopefully I've answered your question.
Yeah, no, that was really fascinating. It's got me thinking, like, you work so much with different clients, individuals, particularly from like a professional context. And these are learnings which can be, you know, applied to increasing their credibility in the workplace and how they're sort of seen in different spaces and circles. But what I'm keen to also unpack is, like, outside of the professional sphere, like, where have you also seen benefits to people increasing their communication and presentation capabilities in their personal life? Like, do you think there is, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, like, do you think there's value that trickles over, not just when they're at their work, doing their job, but also in a personal capacity?
Yes, and right. So many things. So if you can control your nerves, especially in a public speaking arena, convert it from nerves to excitement, control the breathing, understand the physiological responses, the reaction of what's going on to your narrative state, which is the internal dialogue. Think about where the application can be used. That application, can be used. Meetings, salary negotiations, working with a client who's quite hard, having those uncomfortable conversations with your team leaders, or inverse of that, say you're managing a team, asking someone to step up, step more, or trying to, through story, elevate or convince, create some excitement around your project plan going forward. Because it's an internal dialogue you're having. You're presenting maybe to the board, trying to ask for more money to be pulled down. Those are all situations of storytelling, and public speaking can be kind of moved to the side, and it's not a stage with 100 people or 1,000 people. Yeah, you're totally right. That's very different than the arena of being. But then again, I'm thinking, just popped in my head, sometimes I use, there's a lovely little storytelling model out there called, is the Duarte model. Nancy Duarte did a TEDx talk back in the day called The Shape of Great Presentations. Nancy Duarte, Duarte. And basically it's a really simple shape. Tell me what is, and then tell me what could be. So it's like steps, if you think about it, going up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. What is, what could be, what is, what could be, what is, what could be. Go back and forth, right? Really lovely dynamic as a storytelling model, because all you're not thinking 3-act structures or 5 acts and a denouement. No, you're just thinking, clarify what is, then clarify what could be. Then go back and forth to see the distance between the two in stories. And then obviously in that, try and convince people to come to your side, which in theory is the future state, trying to convince. So if you're trying to convince someone in work that your strategic direction is better, you got to obviously lay the case of what is currently, what is the current strategic direction, and then go, what if we did this? But then build into that the resistance. So you come back to what is. And I know you're going to say we don't have enough money to go in that direction. See, I'm building a relationship and current state because we don't have the funds. But if we become more resourceful versus having resources, we can do it this way. Now we're in a current state and we can reposition this, blah, blah, blah. You can see that we use that. Now I use that even in when I'm chatting to clients on like phone calls, sorry. I go, so what you're currently telling me is blah, 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 but we're trying to get to X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So you can see that these storytelling models, once you figure them out, and you'll hear them everywhere, really good stories.
Yeah, right.
You can start to go, oh, that's what they're doing. And you can be cheeky and just steal shit. So yeah, that's where I would use other things. Yeah.
Because you must also just see like just the general confidence shift in people when they are able to like more effectively communicate what they have going inside.
Yes and no, dude. I gotta be honest. I've had a few people at TEDx specifically, who after it said, I never want to do that as an experience again.
Wow.
You know, because the pressure that they put on themselves
Yeah.
to do that, because it is a kind of an enclosed cage TEDx, right? There's a high expectation. So it's like you're going into
Might
the
be
arena,
the highest.
right? You're going into the arena there, and you're going into fight in a said like Fight Club, like you said earlier. But it's the wrong approach. You should approach that with. I think that's why my TEDx Nelson talk resonated with a lot of people, because it with a small c, it looked quite casual as a talk. And it was for me. It wasn't a deep kind of attempt to try and craft something peculiar and arresting that the world would sit up and take notice and have that virality to it. So no. And I think therefore lies in the too often used word authenticity. So if you just tell stories and if you tell them in your way, casually, with a small c, you know, not too kind of political around it, or strategic, just like, no, be your best self up there. Just have a chat to the audience, right? I find they're low pressure for yourself. And then the conversion rate is much better in terms of the emotional resonance from the audience perspective. But you're right, and you've done some speak. I've seen you about a couple of things in the government stuff, and that you hold yourself really well up there. But I can also see a lot of nerves.
Definitely.
But again, that's like natural. It's like you're still. Well, the last time I saw you a few years ago, so forgive me, you're a lot older now. but again, that I come back to what I talk about when storytelling in a public context is an exposure skill. Yeah, it's not something you can learn or practice for. You can prepare for it. That's difference. And I often see people over practice, and therefore they have, again, the high volatility of failure rate because they over practice, and then therefore if they miss their beat or if something goes wrong, they're not prepared for that. They just practice for something going right. So that's my transition a lot with my clients, is stop practicing but prepare. Expose yourself as often as possible, speaking up, having voice, and in doing so, learn your style with self-reflection. But again, I'm asking of people to do something most people don't want to do, which is usually watch themselves back.
Oh, I can't.
I can't
even do podcast episodes. I don't watch them. No.
It's hilarious if you watch yourself back.
Yeah.
Little tip, watch yourself back, right? Next time you do a talk and record it, but turn the volume off and scrub through it. And all I want you to look for and have a giggle about, be forgiving, be loving to yourself, but have a giggle about your gestural cues. Because when you scrub through the video with no sound on, you pick up the repetitive gestural cues that you don't even think you have. It might be like a foot movement. You come in and you start to like just rock back and forth. Right? But remember, we're speeding it up, so that's what. Or a hand comes out often. Or you're constantly looking over at someone, right? Because they're your friend. And you're like, oh, it's interesting. And then the trick is in self-awareness, trying to coach yourself out of that. Try to alleviate yourself of that pressure, going, oh, I'm doing that again. I'm just going to put my hand away because I do that too much, right? And put it in my pocket. Think about all these things. Again, exposure is the only way through that. Yeah,
and those body cues are so important. I'm keen to get it in there as well. I was also keen to ask, though, like, what's the worst speaking gig that you've ever done? Have you ever had some, like, nightmares back in the day?
Yeah. I remember one of my first ones. It was up in the northeast of England. And I felt so sick before it, of nerves. And I literally nearly threw up. You know when you're gagging, you're not doing anything, but you're in the toilet. And I came out and I was drenched in sweat. And that's all I could think about, is how sweaty I not only felt, but obviously if you just like look around a little bit, you could see it there, and it stuck to me, and it was a shirt, right?
Oh, and then you're thinking they know how
panicked
I am.
And it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy of just, I'm shit. What am I doing here? I'm sweating. I'm still sweating. I'm going to, oh my God, everybody sees that.
All they're thinking about.
Exactly. I can't remember anything from that gig other than that. I'm wanting just to like, you know, get out of there so quick. And I think I even cut that really short. I like skipped over stuff just to get through it. That was one of my worst in terms of my feeling about it. Other worst ones is really interesting when I find it fun now when I do something that doesn't land or there's a mistake. And what I mean by that is like in certain cultures, certain audiences, something I can say lands quite well, whether it creates a giggle or a confused look because I'm trying to get them confused. Sometimes you miss that. And it's interesting because they don't know. So I never reveal, oh, you're supposed to laugh there. No. It's more like, oh, it's an internal check. Or if something goes wrong with the projector, that's always fun.
Yeah.
Or my favorite one if I forget something, especially if I put up a slide.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so what I've done now is I've learned to just admit that. Because like when something bad happens in your slide deck or something, or this doesn't work, or a slide comes up, you don't know, you go, I can't remember what I'm supposed to say there. And people start to titter a little bit because they're like, you saying, no, seriously, I totally forgot. I'll come back to it. And then at some point you remember, so you go all the way back and people laugh with you and you reveal it through there. Because most people who see you on a stage never want you really to fail. They want to be entertained. They want to be informed. They want to feel something from that experience. Very rarely, unless you got your enemies in the audience, they want you to fall over.
A few heckles.
Yeah, so most of the times they're open to it. And usually you come in the middle somewhere, at the end or at the beginning. So you got to set the tone, or you can change the tone of the audience. That's what I really like when I'm coming in at a bad slot, a speaking slot, like before lunch. That's a graveyard slot, or the one before last, something.
Set up to fail.
Yeah,
and
it's not quite set up. It's just that you're buried a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm like, no, I'm going to go hard here. I'm going to bring the energy in jazz hands, and they're going to go, oh, right, someone, I'm woken up in a sense. I'm going to be engaging and lean forward and pull people forward and bring the energy that I want to see from the audience, because they will mirror it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a bit of Jedi mind tricking going on there. If you can kind of be the energy that you want to see, they will usually meet you there.
A lot of psychology that goes into it is what I'm getting from the talk that we're having today.
Definitely, especially when you look at people and you start like, if I look at you now and you're nodding for some reason, I haven't made any statement to make you nod, but because I'm nodding, you start to nod at me.
Yeah, you copy it.
Isn't that weird? Yeah. And then when you're talking about being in board meetings or something with the team and you're trying to convince them something, saying this is a really good idea. So you show what you now that's a little bit, dark side of the force stuff, but it's fun to know.
It's great.
It's fun to know.
Keen to touch on your TED Talk, which we've sort of brushed over briefly throughout this episode. So it surpassed over 1 million views, which is epic. It's, as you mentioned, called the public speaking lesson you never had. When you see that number of 1 million, what emotions come up to you?
Astonishingly grateful, because I am astonished it reached that number, and then obviously grateful for it. And I get lovely emails from people all over the world going, "Oh, just watch that! It's amazing. Can I have your book?" Yeah, go on. And it's surprising, to be really honest. I remember and it's without arrogance, when I was doing the TEDx stuff, and a lot of speakers would then ask us, what does success look like from a perspective of numbers and views? What should I expect? I'm posting this, the video's coming out, and we'd be like, look, if you're hitting 4 or 5 figures in that, you're winning. That's a good reach. It's amazing, fantastic. But you got to put the effort in. You got to promote it. So when I reflect on, like, I hit that number in 2 years, it didn't just go 1 million. It took its time, but equally still 1 million. Kind of cool. I can't fathom how that happened, other than I did do a little bit of promo, but I didn't go hard. I didn't like do a big marketing campaign. A few times I posted on LinkedIn and cut a few things up. No integrated 360-degree marketing campaign that made it the 1 million. But the biggest compliment I think I got, apart from those emails from actual humans, which is lovely, is it got featured on TED.com. So some TEDx's get pulled up, because this is a TEDx talk versus a TED talk.
This is a TED talk. Do you want to explain the difference for that?
So TED, as we know, Big TED as we call it, TED.com, happens every year in Vancouver, the big TED conference. They do some sub events like TED Women, TED Active used to run, TED Global, TED Live, TED, some other ones, right? But the big TED, if you're on the big TED stage, that's massive. And it goes on TED.com. Great. And it gets distributed out. And we've all seen those videos. TEDx is a franchise version of TED. So you today can apply for a TEDx license to run a TED-like or TED version conference with a lot of rules and governance around it, but a TED-like thing, 18 minutes per talk for your local area. And you have to produce it all, and it's got to be for non-profit reasons. So you can't make money out of it. So I never made a dime off all the time I did TEDx's stuff. So coming back to then being featured on TED.com, that's quite unusual. So sometimes they will pull up from the working classes, the peasants from the TEDx pool.
Class,
Yeah. They pull it up and feature it on TED.com. But I don't know why. I don't know who does that. I don't know what the algorithmic basis is. And they don't tell you, which is weird. Because I remember being in Dallas, someone texted me at the end of last year going, I just watched your TED talk. And I'm like, oh, I'm like that always. I'm like, no, it's TEDx talk, but thank you. No, it's on TED. I'm like, no, it's on the TED Talks YouTube, which is the TEDx Talks, but it's, thanks. Because I don't want to be like wanky and go, yeah, I got TED Talks and TEDx.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, it's on TED.com. And they sent me the link. And I'm like, oh,
wow.
Someone thought enough of it to bring it up into that little curated pool. So for me, that's my little mountain that I climbed, which I had nothing to do with it. I was actually carried up there. So that was nice to see that. That was my biggest kind of compliment of late, to do with that video. But it was fun to do.
That's incredible.
Fun to see.
And I mean, like, what are some of those messages outside just seeing the metrics and the numbers?
Yeah.
How else do you define, I guess, like the impact that you've seen through delivering that talk and what it's meant for other people?
Yeah, it only comes down to just the qualitative rather than quantitative, which is the numbers. Qualitative, people email me or talking to me about it. But I'm also kind of shot myself in the foot a little bit, because a lot of my masterclasses where I go in and do workshops with clients, group rather than one-to-ones, that's all my content, essentially, now, up online. It's
all
like,
your IP.
Dude, it's just like, watch my talk and I'll come and have a chat, I suppose, But it's a broader version. Obviously, the masterclasses, I go into much depth and we get people to do. So, but it does give me, I suppose, a bit of a legacy brand now and a bit of pedigree with that. But yeah, talking to people saying, oh, I watched your talk, even from people I've known for years, but have never seen me in action. Like, hey, good at that stuff. And you're like, yeah. We don't
It's my bread and butter.
Yeah, but of course you have friendships you don't overlap in professional, right? So it's kind of fun to see that. It's rather sweet more than anything. It's like it's like a pat on your head from your mum. It's really nice.
That's great. And I think there must be a lot of pressure heading into a TEDx talk where you're speaking about public speaking on like the biggest platform and you're giving like a masterclass in it.
Right.
Did you feel any of those nerves going into the conversation?
No. I felt nothing but excitement. Apart from, and I was telling you outside, apart from the minute before I went on, I still hadn't had the battery pack attached to my mic. And I started to hear the MC introduce me. And I'm like, I'm not going out until I'm mic'd, because I know from an event perspective, I always tell your speakers, don't go until you're ready and all that other stuff. So I'm like, I got to be a diva. I'm not going out until I'm mic'd. Right? But luckily enough, the guy turned up. And the only nerves I did have is in the TEDx talk, when you watch it, there's a bit of me illustrating with a piece of paper why you shouldn't have scripts. I forgot to take that out with me. But luckily enough, again, the guy, the stagehand, the producer on the side, snuck the paper in and you wouldn't have seen that. But up until that point, I was speaking a little bit on neutral. I was just thinking about how I forgot my paper. How am I going to get off there? And I spotted someone with a notebook in the front row, and I was going to ask her to borrow that. But it's weird, that thing about you can have a dialogue with yourself when you're still speaking about something else if you know your shit. So I was never nervous, because I've coached myself enough to know nerves are exactly the same as excitement. If I make the transition in my narrative brain, my internal dialogue to excitement, I just feel up. And those butterflies serve me rather than eat me from the inside, which is what nerves do, right? But if you're excited, butterflies, come on, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling a bit tingly. About it. So nothing but love. Like, let me on there. I'm like that.
I think, and with those, and that's why I love one of those sort of key messages throughout your TEDx presentation was like, you're not nervous, you're excited. And I do think whenever you get those feelings of like pressure or those nervous butterflies in your stomach, I think in order for you to really like be at your best and perform at your best, you need to have that feeling. I feel like that feeling of sort of like unease really helps you actually perform to like the highest level that you absolutely can. I think when I had Paddy Gower on the podcast, because he works in some really pressure cooker situations, he's doing the, political leaders debates, which is broadcasted in front of millions of New Zealanders, with the two prime ministers battling it out on national television and having to host and facilitate that.
Yeah.
But he's got this concept of entering like the 99th percentile. And he's like, this is when I am Paddy Gower. Like, this is when I am I'm at my optimal sort of focus point, and I just absolutely deliver. And he uses, I guess, like the feeling of nerves in a systemized way.
Love it.
To really supercharge his ability on the day. And he's got a process to get into that. So yeah, I feel like with that feeling of nervousness, you can really channel that in the right direction.
And as an extension to that as well, you get into a flow state if you know your stuff as well. So it's an odd dichotomy of feeling a lot, wherever that feeling is, because for other people it might be the shakes, it might be something else, it might be a tick in the back of the neck or something else, right? Where then I'm just intuitively flowing because you have mastery in your craft. And you watch any kind of discipline, someone who has mastery in their craft, whether it be from, riveting something right through to drawing something, there's a flow state to that. And they can usually orate over the top. They can usually storytell. So there's a muscle memory to it. Yeah. Hence why I was up there on that talk having to do my little dance at the beginning and have some fun while thinking, how do I navigate the problem I have because I forgot my prop?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, I know a couple of performers and they talk about that. They talk about being in the zone, trying to just feel it because you've learned the script. You know it now. Now it's about emoting the script or being the script versus saying the script. You've gone beyond the saying. Yeah. Fascinating discipline, right?
It is, 100%.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you do on the lead up to, let's say, like a big presentation that helps you just focus and get in the zone? Have you got any, I guess, like rituals which you perform? Skip breakfast or have like a light breakfast? What does that look like for you?
You're right, yeah. Never go on a full stomach.
Yeah.
And always have a pee.
Yeah.
And things like that. But no, there's nothing for me that's peculiar. I know a lot of people who have done stuff that I've worked with who have a specific ritual, like don't talk to me beforehand, stuff like that. I'm fine right up until word go. Once I'm on that stage, I'm in the zone. I know what I'm doing because I would have prepared well. Yeah. To do it. And it depends, right? Because I've spoken on stages where I haven't prepared anything. I've just gone on because I've been invited on a topic. So I'm like, I know that. I'll just, those 3 stories, which will be about 10 minutes in length each, and I've got 15, 20 minutes, look at that, and then got a Q&A. Yeah, cool. I'm good. So what we call naked presenting, where there's nothing else but you. The most popular TED talk on the planet is from a guy called Sir Ken Robinson, Why Schools Kill Creativity. And it's the perfect example of just someone having a conversation with the audience, but he's the only one speaking. No slides, no going anywhere, no showing, like standing, connecting. Like that's mastery for me. But I would have loved to have known his, well, I actually knew Sir Ken, bless him. I met up with him a few times. So I know that he put a lot of work into that, it really is. But that's the same with any discipline. Yeah. People who know their stuff make it look good. Yeah. But I do believe that most people can get to a sense of competency in public speaking where their nerves are not the ruler of the experience. And for most people, that's where we start with. It's confidence. It's those other things, speeding up and all the other nuances. It's fun.
And you've got the 3, I guess, like foundations of a good story or a good presentation, grace, credibility, resonance. Is there anything else that goes into telling a good story that you need to be aware of?
It depends, right? So I think I mentioned earlier about failing some of our speakers in the TEDx process. Remember one specifically failing them because you get this little red carpet you're supposed to stand on, and we were teaching people how to stand, literally stand and elevate and project out and stand there and rockstar pose and all that other stuff. And then that person just weren't getting it. And until we spent time with that person, really understanding them, it's like, we're failing you. We're really sorry. Right. Got a comfy chair, sat her down, became intimate. And that's the idea of them. Well, what's the best version of you that we can create on that stage? It's like when I work with clients, and in my little book that I wrote afterwards, was like, I got a chapter on being a diva. Being a nice diva. Nice. Not a blue M&M's diva. But what I mean by that is like, what are the conditions for your success, right? And ask for them. Like for me, I want to know, I bring my own laptop. I got my own clicker. I prefer lapel mics or Madonna mics, right? Yep. I can do handhelds, but I don't do lecterns.
Okay.
Now that wouldn't be a problem because some places, they just have the mic on the lectern.
Yeah.
Right? If I don't do lecterns, and I've got to tell them that, right? I don't project on a coloured wall and only some things got pretty things and I want to make sure they look pretty. And stuff like that. So it sounds like I'm being a diva, but it is. But I then arrive knowing the conditions for my success are set.
Yeah, true.
In terms of expectations. Yeah. For some people, it's like, I want a handheld mic.
Yeah.
Because that's my comfortability once I've got this. But I've worked with so many people. I go to many conferences, and one of my big bugbears is people who don't know how to use mics.
Yeah, happens a lot.
They get a mic and they go, "Hey, it's great to be here." And once they hear themselves, they hold it away because it sounds loud to them.
Yeah, yeah.
Problem with that's what mics are supposed to do.
Yeah,
to amplify you. So already we got an instinct to not hear ourselves, but that's what mics do. So we pull it away, and then the people in the sound booths are like, to sensitivity. And then sometimes they bring it back because they forget and it gets really loud. And then they do that again. Again, people at the back are doing this constantly. Yeah. And they're gesturing with their mics as well. So it goes from loud to sound. So some of my, in my book and in some of the sessions I run, I literally get people to hold the mic to their chest and forget about it. Unless you're turning your head, you're not going to, or put it on your chin is the best one. Like I know you spit M&M rapper-y stuff. Stick it on your chin.
Palms are sweaty.
Yeah. But stick it on your chin, you forget about it.
Yeah.
As long as it's touching your skin, your chin, you've got a perfect mic level for the people at the back.
Yeah.
And you can just talk normally.
Yeah. Yeah, so many external factors, which go into like setting the right conditions to nail the presentation. I'm keen to also just move into a little bit more around sort of your approach at the moment within this new digital age of sort of social media and technology. I found it really interesting when we were looking to organize this. You don't use like almost third-party apps or like even like booking a sort of calendar appointment. I wanted to have a conversation around like data sovereignty and like the age of sort of social media. Why I'd be keen to pick your brains. Like, why is, I guess, data sovereignty across social media platforms so important to you and should be important to everyone else listening?
I'm not going to make the argument for the latter, only for me.
Yeah.
So if it's important to you, it is. If it's not, okay. Again, back in 2006 when I launched my company around emerging technologies, I was all for this, like chuck everything up online. But again, we didn't have the mobile phones that we have now, right? So the conditions for that were very different. And also most of the platforms online did have a pure ethic about enabling people. It was not the Wild West. Think about MySpace and Bebo compared to Facebook and TikTok. They do the same thing. Essentially, they create a platform where you can have a voice, you can gather followers, you can put up videos or text or whatever. They provide an outlet, and you can also gather a community around said outlet. And you can follow other people through said platform. Cool. But it's why they do it. It's very different now. And the reasons, they continue to be successful and are the algorithmic stuff, which is so much data out there. Read anything by Jonathan Haidt and stuff like that, that really the technology companies are conditioning us, being anybody who uses them, for divisiveness, to have an emotional, usually negative response that we feel deeply engaged. And it's the infinite scroll. So they just want to keep you online forever. Yeah. So now translate that to every platform. And what they're trying to do is gold used to be the gold standard. Then it was oil. And now data is the new oil. So I'm trying to remove myself as much from that now because I kind of have been in a space for a bit too long, and maybe I'm a little bit old and curmudgeonly. That's fine. That's fine. It's just my learned experience and lived experience, knowing that a lot of these platforms now try to serve me stuff up I'm not that interested in reacting to, but I find so much joy in curating my own social media menu. I still got like an RSS reader. Do you know what RSS is? Yeah,
because we use that for the podcast to sort of plug in and it distributes different platforms.
Yeah, it's basically RSS means really simple syndication. Right? Back in the day, we used to teach people how to start RSS. Google used to have a wonderful one called Google Reader. And you plug in your RSS, so blogs, YouTube channels, podcasts, all this stuff. You just take a little link, usually the RSS feed. As an XML file, it's just a piece of text that kind of issues a notice that every time you go to that little file and it goes, oh, it's a new podcast or a new thing that's popped up from that file, we'll pull it into your reader for you. Just like an inbox for anything you subscribe to.
All right.
Right?
Yeah.
Great. So I've had an RSS feed for like since 2003, coming in, loads of different ones. I've used so many platforms. And that's still my best source for stuff. Inspirational stuff, because I've curated it myself. Now, flip down when I go on LinkedIn or anything. LinkedIn is the only last platform I'm using as a traditional social media thing. I'm not on Facebook, Instagram, or any other ones. It's just not giving me the stuff that I'd like. It's trying to serve me the stuff they want me to see. And I can't define my own social media menu.
Yeah.
I don't see the stuff from the people I follow. It's from the people, third party, who commented on something that I might like, but who are members and pay in for that reach.
Yeah.
And I do come back to the idea that it's like a casino.
Yeah.
You pay to play.
100%.
And the house will always win.
Yeah.
And their job is to keep you in there.
Yeah.
Serve you free drinks.
Yeah.
Make you a little bit sloshy.
Yeah.
And keep you engaged, so you spend more money.
It's so true. It's so true. And we've had a few conversations on the podcast. One with Melinda McLean, who's the CEO of Outward Bound, and she's sort of spearheading at the moment this new campaign for young people. Well, I guess for the government to put restrictions in place for young people around sort of social media. So her whole thing is, I think it's sort of like ban social media or restrict social media use for young people under the age of 16. And I remember having her on. She was talking about it because at Outward Bound, they do these 21-day sort of outdoor education experiences for young people.
Okay.
And I went to Outward Bound when I was 18, like the best 21 days of my life. But then again, like that was still to this day probably the first and last time I'll ever go 21 days without like touching my phone. And it was just like, I remember coming back and like touching my cell phone and like looking at social media and I was like, what is this shit? But then you fall back into that same trap with the algorithms and you're just continuing to like scroll, go on TikTok, look at Instagram Reels, and you're not getting any value out of it. But it is that psychological pull, and I'm so guilty to that. Like, I'll admit I've got a social media addiction. I think probably 9 out of 10 people probably do, especially for like the younger generation, but also the older generation too. I don't like people who are like, it's just young people, but then you go on like a train or any public transport and you see everyone's just head down, including myself. And it's designed that way. So again, you got to forgive yourself. In all the big social media platforms, they have hired people with PhDs in addiction, but they call them engagement engineers. That's right.
So straight away, we're at a loss, man. I don't have a PhD in addiction. I don't know kind of the psychological thing that needs to trigger me, but they do. So I'm not saying they've all gone into that really maliciously. I'm just saying the market, the capitalistic approach defines that they have to keep raising their prices in terms of the engagement, keep raising the shareholder value and all that other stuff, and the relevance only comes from that. But real life still has more bandwidth. The fact that we're doing this in person, right, and we could have done this over a Skype call or whatever calls that we do now, WhatsApp, and record it and put it out, but you still want to get in a room with people.
Totally.
And podcast, I still love social media. I think it's amazing value. Again, where in the last 20 years, we can have a global voice instantly. No other generation could claim that before us. Really. That's pretty awesome. Problem we have now is signal to noise. It's so noisy out there because everybody has a global voice instantly. And everybody has a podcast.
He was saying that.
With the greatest respect. And I've been doing it for a while. So the tension is now, right, where's the signal coming from? And the signal can be just your little walled gardens. And the signal doesn't get through. So, it's
interesting time, man. It's a really crazy time.
It is, man.
Hey, DK, where can people get in touch with you and your mahi? We'll move to some sort of quick fire questions and we'll finish with a quote. But I'm aware you've also got like a book. How can people get in touch with you if they really want to, I guess, hone their craft?
Thank you, man. Yeah. Well, just my website would be the first point of call, and the best one, justadnak.com, but you spell that out, JUSTADANDAK, justadnak.com. Hopefully you stick it in your show notes.
Yeah, we will.
Flying in there.
In the description.
And that's got my blog, it's got my books on it, like you said, and really cheap as chips. And if you can't afford it, let me know. Fire it to you for free, not a problem. It's digital. That's the best place to find me.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll put a link in the description wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast.
Thank you, dude.
And DK, what brings you true happiness?
I haven't found that yet. Not true happiness.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what that is. Contentment, but not happiness.
What brings you contentment then?
A lot of things, like doing my little art things and helping other people. Definitely when I finish a job or something, especially when I'm doing events, I'm really content when it just flows. My favorite feeling is during the TEDx experiences that I did, was like during the TEDx events themselves. I usually ended up being like stagehand. So bringing like chairs on and removing stuff off, because there's nothing else for me to do at that point.
True.
Done my job. I've set it all up. It works. And it's the same with my other events. And I just love when everything flows. I'm just sitting there going, it kind of worked. It's always kind of worked. It never worked. It just kind of worked.
What is the meaning of life?
I'm going to steal a quote from one of my favorite poets, Rainer Maria Rilke, old Austro-German poet, who said, the purpose of life is to be defeated by greater and greater things.
I like that. Advice you wish you knew about when you were younger?
Don't take things so personally.
What does legacy mean to you?
Usually thinking through the eyes of the lens of my niece and nephews. So how can I leave this place being the world better than I found it?
If you could change one thing in New Zealand, what would this be?
Don't be so precious with your ideas, with your ambition. Be more audacious.
And what do you believe is the main thing that is holding back young people in New Zealand?
Damn, that's a good one. Probably not listening to themselves as much as listening to the media, defining what success looks like. And don't strive for being famous. Famous is not a thing.
Yeah, I like that. It's good. Yeah, too many young people idolizing like Andrew Tate at the moment, eh?
And their idea of success is being famous. Like,
yeah. Awesome. Hey, DK, really appreciate your time, man. Love all the work that you're doing, and super stoked we could, rip into this podcast and unpack your journey, your story, and some of the key ingredients which goes into public speaking. And I think for so many people listening to this podcast, I think public speaking is actually like a really common theme in everybody's life. So I'm sure it's going to resonate with a lot of people.
Well, I got to say thank you for the opportunity, but also thank you for doing this, because I know you elevate and create opportunities for other people to have voice. So coming back to my purpose line, if anybody else is shadowing me in that space or echoing me, it's lovely to see people just creating space for others.
Cheers, bro.
So thank you.
No, cheers, bro. And we'll finish up with this quote from Gabriel Marquez. And then that will do us. What matters in life is not what happens to you, but what you remember and how you remember it. Cheers, DK.